Hi, and welcome to our August version of Book Club Night. This month we read The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. I'm Jen from Booklore Productions, and my cohort is.
Heather from Follow Along Blog.
And so I read the book this go round. I had tried the audiobook, and I just I think the word you used for it was dry. Found it really dry.
It was extremely dry, and the narrator did not help with that. I hate to say it like that, but
And so I went ahead and I kind of read the book, and I found that actually reading the book, you got more contextual clues than you did with the audio version.
I would say that's probably because there is a lot going on with the story. A lot like Hamilton and Ron Chernow.
Mm-hmm.
Erik Larson jumps around a little bit, and there are a lot of names, and
it's hard to keep it all straight.
Yes, especially if you can't go back in the book and, do reference to what was written earlier.
Right. And so it starts out kind of with an ensemble cast. Like, of course, while you're reading a book, you've got this movie going on in your head. And so we've got an ensemble cast that it's kind of like if you were to take the cast of like Valentine's Day or something, one of those chick flicks with all the different storylines and put it all together. That's kind of how I see this book, except there's a lot more men than women.
Well, that's because all of the women get killed off.
Yes. Well, except for the ones that he marries and then has that Holmes marries and then has nothing to do with.
It's almost like he's protecting him in that way.
That is true. Hi. So we've got Ollie breaking in. I guess he really wants us to go ahead and talk about how it opened. And it opens with Burnham and how he's on board the Olympic. And this is where those contextual clues I was talking about came in, because you're like, okay, he's overseas. He's on a boat. It's not a slow boat to China, but rather a slow boat from England. And he wants to talk to his friend who's aboard another boat. And his friend's one of the only other remaining people that were architects and, he wasn't an architect, he was an artist, but he was involved with the project of the World's Fair, and his name's Millet. And you're like, okay. So you're like, okay, Millet's on this other boat. And then you're like, Olympic. That was the boat that went after the Titanic. Oh my God, Millet's on the Titanic. He is so going to be Jack.
Who never makes it on the door.
That's right. Rose just would not give up room on that door. There was totally room on that door.
And she totally let go.
She did.
Totally let go.
So there's other like contextual clues, and it's talking about this Burnham. And did you get that he has the king disease? Gout?
Yes, I did get that.
Yes.
My dad has it, so I was kind of like, hey, those symptoms sound familiar.
Mm-hmm. And so the other thing I kind of thought was really weird about, not so much weird as more interesting, as Burnham is talking about his sense of honor when he marries Margaret. And he tells Sherman, that's her father, that his sense of honor has him reject Burnham's withdrawal because something went on in his family, and so Burnham was going to have to renege on his question of marriage to Margaret. And then John Sherman, Margaret's daddy, is like, there's a black sheep in every family. And then later Sherman goes off to Europe, would run off to Europe with the daughter of a friend. And you're like, oh, snap!
Yes, things got really messy really quickly. Now, you mentioned Burnham's sense of honor. Looking up a little background, his parents brought him up under the teaching of Swedenborgian called the teachings of Swedenborgian called the New Church, which ingrained in him a strong belief that man should strive to be of service to others. Just a little background information.
Well, so anyways, Burnham, he's on the Olympic, and they're going to rescue his buddy on the Titanic. And he starts reminiscing about his time that he met him and how they worked together on the fair and all that occurred during that time. So it's kind of like a little, he's writing in his journaler about all that had happened. And so we're introduced to Burnham's partner, architectural partner, not partner in that kind of sense, John Wellborn Root, who's actually from Lumpkin, Georgia.
Lumpkin. Such a lumpkin.
Yeah.
They actually did a lot of planning for the city of Chicago, not just the World's Fair.
Uh-huh.
More little background there for you.
And Kansas City owes several buildings to Root. But so I've got a question for you.
Yes.
So Root, he meets this girl. He falls in love with her. She gets consumption and and he proposes anyways. So 6 weeks after they're married, she dies. If death do us part was only 6 weeks, and your spouse would be deathly ill for all of that time, how would you have handled the wedding and the marriage?
This is a very walk to remember type of question.
Yes, it is.
I don't know. I feel like I would have to have a serious connection. I mean, it would have to be like, we need to be married.
Soulmate.
Yes, it would have to be like soulmates, no questions asked. Like, because I want as much time with you as I possibly can without society's rules and laws getting in the way. Because at the time, 18-something.
Early 18.
I want to say mid
1880s.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, because if you're gonna, you know what I mean, like with all the, because if you're dying, I mean, you still want to. People are gonna hopefully talk about you after you're dead, and they don't want to say, "Well, she shacked up with this guy right before she died."
That's
you know what I mean? So he's like, he tried. I would assume that he did it honorably, but
like he married Mary Walker because they had been courting, and that maybe he wasn't really in love with her, or he wasn't capable to handle the death do you part type thing with her deathly ill, but he married her anyways. Is that what you're thinking? Or that he really loved her?
I think he really loved her. You know, the romantic in me wants to say that he really loved her.
You're like, oh, come on. That is totally his Jamie.
Well, I mean, you want to root for somebody, you know what I mean? And his last name is Root. Now, not spelled the same way, but you know what I mean? You just want to be there. You want it to be.
Yes. The kind that grows deep. Root kind of grows deep. Um,
Root
yes.
was not.
So he marries her. She dies. He's got his period of mourning. And 2 years later, he marries her only bridesmaid, Dora Monroe.
Super.
And he's got a little, Doris Monroe's sister's got a little, I don't know, I guess crush on him because she's like, I will never marry unless I can have what uh, Root and Dora have. So you're kind of like, well, do they really love each other? Did he really love the first girl? Or was it. Did he really love the first girl? And if he did, was it that love of her and Dora's love of her that caused them to come together? I'm thinking so. I'm thinking so. Okay. And still on the same wavelength with Root and Burnham because they're still in the Titanic area. You kind of notice that, or to me, it felt like their partnership. Ooh, hi, Ellie. Their partnership works so well is because it plays to the strengths of each man. Like Root was architectural engineer and Burnham was more about the publicity and the socializing and the finances. I mean, he did the other things, but he was more the face of the company type
He
thing.
was the planner of it all. The way that I read his background is that he was a planner. He wasn't necessarily going. He's gonna be the one that's gonna draw all the pictures, come up with this beautiful plan for Chicago and the World's Fair. But that's about it. I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
I do. I see that, and it goes on later and talks about how, spoiler alert, Root dies. Womp womp womp, and that's kind of the catalyst that starts every Murphy's Law thing. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong.
Exactly.
And so Root dies, and he allows Root to have basically all the credit for it. Even though the author Larson's kind of like, well, the architect of the dream being realized is right here. He just lets Root take all the credit for it. I mean, what are you gonna do? Be like, hello, he's dead. No, he didn't. I mean, that just looks bad.
It does look bad, but I mean, how are you going to fight the dead guy?
Exactly. You can't. He's dead. He can't defend himself unless he's
Nope.
a zombie. And then you double tap that to the head, and we're.
My friend, that's a whole different issue all in itself.
Or you call up Daryl Dixon and be like, "Hi, Daryl. How you doing?"
I hate to say this, but I feel like I would have to call somebody else to take care of a zombie for me. I don't know if I could actually, even though it's a zombie and it's already dead, it's like the living dead, I would still hate taking that person's second life from them. I don't know. I'm a weirdo like that. What about, now here's the one. Oh wait, let's talk about Homestead first.
Okay.
I was going to skip to H.H. Holmes because,
yes.
But
so one of the other big main characters in the story is H.H. Holmes, who was born Herman Webster Mudgett. There's your name.
Yes, Mudgett. What would you do? Would you change your name if your last name was Mudgett?
Yes.
I would too.
I think I would have to. A Mudgett, scrub it. What rhymes with that? Mudget, budget.
I don't know. Mudget just sounds like something that you found on the bottom of your shoe. You know what I mean? I got a bunch of mudget on my foot. I don't know what I stepped in.
Yeah, it sounds more like that flaming bag of poo that you stomp on when kids are playing Ding Dong Doorbell Ditch.
Exactly.
Unless you're us and have a fire extinguisher by the door, and then you're like, psh, and then you're like, you're on candid camera. Come clean this stuff up.
Or I feel like then you're asking for people to put poop on your front door, on your front porch. Then what have you done in your life to garner this kind of upset and hate?
Right. But
off topic. Anyway.
But he didn't really have a garnering of hate. He was the total opposite. He was a ladies' man.
He was some kind of man.
He had some strong game going.
He did.
I mean, it says the book said that, and I quote, he broke prevailing rules of casual intimacy. He stood too close, stared too hard, touched too much and long, and women adored him for it.
See, but reading that to me, I just got chills. Just the part where it says he touched too much.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, how would you feel about somebody who came up to you and he was like, hey, how are you going? He's, one, staring at you. He's staring you down. Then he's inside your personal bubble. And he doesn't even just leave it at that. After that, he wants to, like, put a hand on your arm or put his arm around your shoulder. Like, what would you do with that?
Usually that's when your pack of girlfriends steps in at the bar because they're all like, whoa, buddy, you a little too drunk and a little too handsy, okay?
Now, I will say, I have had a drunk guy try to come, he was like stumbling up to me, trying to hit on me, and he kind of cornered me, and I literally spun myself out of his grasp before his buddy was like, hey, leave her alone. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, yeah.
Like, there's this TV show, and it, McLeod's Daughters. It's a TV show from Australia, and there's this one scene that has always kind of like stuck with me, and the brother that has a limp, I can't remember his name right now. Anyways, he tells this thing to one of the main characters, and her name's Tess, and they're the ship. You're like, yeah, don't go blowing holes in my ship. So he says that every woman has this ring around her, and you do not step into this ring unless you're absolutely certain how she feels. And I'm like, that is something every man needs to know, because that is true.
Yes, and I don't want to just pin this on men. I want to put it on the women too. I'm not gonna say like I feel like a woman is hitting on me, but I definitely have like that bubble of personal space.
Yes.
And unless I know you really well, like, leave my bubble alone.
Don't be handsy like that, okay?
Yes, you get those people who you just meet, and they're like, let me give you a hug. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what to do with my life.
And they don't tell you at the beginning that they're a hugger, right?
No, they don't. They don't tell you until afterwards. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just a hugger. I'm like, well, what am I going to do with that now? I can't, like, spin out of your grasp. You've already, like, entangled me with your octopus arm. Like, what do you do?
It's different if they're like, I'm a hugger, and then they go in for the hug. Because then you feel a little prepared.
Yes, but then as a person who is not a hugger, and I will admit that I am not a hugger, and I'm really weird about personal space, I just don't, like, what do you do? Like, throw your arms up in an X and you're like, I'm not a hugger. Like, they're already coming at you. You don't want to, like, I don't know.
You stand there like a stick and take it?
and then you get made fun of for it, because I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody make fun of me.
Oh.
What kind of hug was that? Well, friend, let's ask before you touch another person, another human. They're like, well, I'm not gonna, I can't even go down that rabbit hole. But going back to H.H. Holmes and his creepy ways, I wonder about his background, because he did have a violent alcoholic for a father, and then he was also bullied by his schoolmates, because H.H. Holmes was a very smart student, and it caused jealousy among his classmates, who then tried to scare him by forcing him into a doctor's office and making him stand face to face with a human skeleton, because back then they didn't have like those plastic skeletons for people to look at. They were legitimately human skeletons. And they like rubbed the skeleton's hands on H.H. Holmes's face. And Holmes says that it terrified him, but then he found it fascinating, whereas other people were like, no, he was not scared at all. He seemed completely fine with it. And then he became obsessed with death afterwards, and then started dissecting animals as a hobby, which in most, I don't want to say most, because that's classifying things that I don't actually have research on, but you hear of people saying, like, if you torture animals or kill animals when you're young,
that's one of the preceptor.
It's like a marker for a crazy person, not a crazy person, but a murderer.
Yeah, serial killer.
He becomes he goes to medical school, so people could say, well, he was just fascinated by like human bodies, like how they work, because he went to medical school, or he went to medical school because he wanted to learn how to kill people, like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. But before that, he meets this woman, and they end up getting married. So he's a teenager. He gets married. And
Clara.
Yes, Clara. And then he leaves her, picks up, doesn't really say a word, just leaves her, and goes off to college.
And their son. Don't forget about their son.
Ah, yes. See, it didn't really talk that much about him leaving the kid. It just mentioned more that he had left Clara and went to college. And then he eventually ends up in Chicago. But all during this time, he becomes more of a con man. And he starts in with these schemes to cheat insurance companies and figure out how to con people out of their hard-earned money. And
well, he also, and this is where it gets kind of weird, he does it with live people a couple of times, but that's also, it's hard to get insurance on like a live person sometimes, because you have to have their permission. Right. But while he was enrolled in school, and mind you, like stealing cadavers out of graveyards and stuff was frowned upon, but physicians did that because they needed the bodies for science to study. So they would go to graveyards and stuff like that, steal cadavers. Well, while he was enrolled in school, he stole cadavers from the laboratory, disfigured the bodies, and claimed that victims were killed accidentally in order to collect insurance money from policies he took out on the deceased person. Right. So the person was already dead. He took out the policy and then was like, hey, look, this person was in an accident. They died again.
Which leads us to his second wife, Myrta. And by this time, he's in Chicago, and he's changed his name to H.H. Holmes. And so he marries Myrta. But before he kind of marries her, he meets her parents. And they're all like, I don't like him. No, 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 no.
But he wins them over.
He does. And that's what I didn't get. I was like, how does he win them over? Because
they wanted him out of their personal space. They're like, fine, we like you, just get out of my space.
He's got to, because he tells Myrta's dad that he should take out a life insurance policy and name him the beneficiary.
Okay.
And so then the Myrta's dad is in Chicago visiting, and he's like, okay, well, you should stay the night here. And so he stays the night. And then Holmes asked him if he would like to see the roof of his building.
Oh, don't do it.
And you're totally like, at this point, I'm screaming at the book, don't do it. He's totally going to throw you off the roof. Oh, no, it wasn't for the insurance money. It was forging checks. He was forging a check at this point. And it wasn't his dad. It was a cousin or uncle.
It was a distant relation.
Distant relation, and he's forged a check for $200 or $2,500. A lot of money. And this was to build his creepy building across the street known as the Castle, which housed a pharmacy, a restaurant, a jewelry store, and
murder castle.
Yes. And above stairs, there was a murder room. Below stairs, there was a murder disposing body kiln. And it kept on talking about how it had dark and creepy corners, and the book does, and how the hallways made no sense. It just, all of a sudden, there would be a hallway or a door, and you wouldn't be expecting it. And so, anyways.
Well, hold on. Before we get to the castle, I have a question to ask you.
Yes.
So his second wife was named Myrta. Could you imagine what her name would be if Holmes had never changed his name?
So she would be Myrta Mudgett?
Yes, Myrta Mudgett.
That sounds like a character from Harry Potter.
Yes, it does. Myrta Mudgett. Like, I can't even get over that name. If I get another animal, I think I'm going to name it, like, Myrta Mudgett. This is my cat, Murder Mudgett. Welcome to my house. Like,
what? And you're just, that just kind of also, if it's not a Harry Potter character, it kind of sounds like it would be a Murder Mudgett.
Oh my goodness, I can't with that name, Mudgett. It does not go well with anything.
Well, her last name or maiden name was Belknap. Belknap. Yes. Myrta Belknap.
Well, it's not the greatest name, but it's definitely better than Myrta Mudgett.
So, yeah. And Holmes has swindled her relative out of $2,500, excuse me. $2,500, $2,500. And so he's showing them the building and all. And he's like, well, let's try this other approach. And he invites Belknap to spend the night in the building. And at first, Belknap's like, no, thank you. But he had already avoided it going to the roof. So he didn't really want to seem rude. So, of course, he's got to stay the night. And he's like, I went to bed.
Politeness kills more people than rudeness does.
But the guy's like, I went to bed and locked the door. Now, I don't know about you, but my grandparents used to tell me how they never had to lock the door growing up. You just didn't lock the door. But this dude here in the 1880s, early 1890s is like, I locked the door. And then he's like, hours passed. Presently, I heard my doorknob tried, and then a key was slipped into the lock.
Ugh.
right? And he calls out, asking who's at the door. The noise stopped. He held his breath and listened. He heard the sounds of feet moving down the hall. He was certain that initially 2 men had been outside his door, but now only one of them was left. He called again. This time a voice answered. Belknap recognized it as belonging to Patrick Quinlan, the caretaker. Patrick Quinlan wanted to come in. I refused to open the door. He insisted for a time, then went away. Belknap laid awake for the rest of the night. Okay, I don't know about you, but like I was like chills just going and I'm like, he totally wanted to kill you. I called it.
That like I just can't. I can't even.
No,
Can't
I
even.
don't. I think I would have had to leave in the middle of the night. But then at the same time, you're like, if I leave this room, they're going to kill me.
Well, that's the thing. Like, if you leave the room, you might run into Holmes. Like, what do you do? I would have put like furniture or something in front of the door.
Right. And you're on the second story, and there's probably no fire escape because fire escapes weren't a thing code then. And so if you're jumping out the window, if it's not barred, then you're looking at, at least a broken leg. Possibly
and then you
death.
can't run after that.
Possibly death. And that kind of defeats the option of trying to escape the guy trying to get in the room.
Yep. I mean, who knows? But, I mean...
So, have you ever had anybody try, like, if you're at a hotel, have you ever heard anybody trying to get into your room?
Yes. Yes.
Like, were like legitimately trying to kill you, or were they drunk and just at the wrong room, or just
I think it was just somebody just at the wrong room. But still, I mean, being who I am, I immediately thought somebody was trying to come in and rob and kill me. But that's just who I am. And I doubt that's what they were doing. They were probably just got the number messed up, like weren't paying attention. But,
Well, even if you are paying attention, because I've been on the other side of that. I've been the one that tries to get in the room that wasn't the correct room. So Mom and I went to Stone Mountain a while back, like sometime last year. And we're there in the hotel in Stone Mountain for a festival thing, an arts and crafts festival thing she had wanted to go to. And I drove because she doesn't like to drive. And I'm trying to get into the room, but the door's already open. And you know how you stick the latch so that it stays open?
Yes.
Okay. So I push open the door, and there are like a room full of ladies congregating on the bed and in the chairs and everything. And I'm like, I check the number outside the door, and I'm like, okay, that's the right number. There's people in this room. Where's our room? And it turns out the guy had written down the number on the little card thing wrong.
Oh no!
Yes.
I would have died.
I was so embarrassed. I'm like, this is our room. How can this be our room? This can't be our room. And the ladies are just like, one of them looks at me like, you're going to try to kill us and rob us, aren't you? And I'm like, this can't be our room. And so we hunt one of those little lobby phones and then find out that we're in the wrong room. And so I have to go halfway back across the mountain and find and get them to redo the card, because when we get to the right room, it doesn't work. It was just, it was a Murphy's Law trip too. So I was kind of like Burnham in that respect. Anything that could go wrong did go wrong. So Meanwhile, let's move on back to I know that was totally off topic, but Holmes.
Go back to America's first serial killer.
Yes, Holmes. So not only was this guy creepily charismatic and a homicidal sociopath, but he had this penchant as a firebug as well, because remember, he plans on burning down the building after the fair is over.
He was just an odd duck. And that sounds very flippant, but he just was. I mean,
Right.
I don't even know.
He meets this this man named Ned and his wife Julia and their daughter Pearl. And Julia is this Amazon at 6 feet tall and with apparently with the body to go with it. You know, voluptuous, and you're envisioning Marilyn Monroe at 6 feet tall with this woman type deal.
Yeah.
And so Ned basically realizes that he's come to an unstated trade, the store in exchange for Julia. But Holmes, in his geniusness of con man, decides that I will stick him with all the bills that I'm not paying, because, you know, he would sell the furniture. He would buy furniture for his building. Then he would have the creditors come. But before they came, he would have sold the furniture and bought new furniture. So it was like a never-ending cycle of, I don't have it. Sorry, you need to go see the building owner, which was an alias of his.
Well, also, Ned also worked at the pharmacy's jewelry counter. And Holmes is said to have had an affair with Julia.
Yes. And you know, Pearl found out about
weird.
it. Pearl found out about
Yep.
it, and do you think the sister-in-law found out about it, and that's why she got so upset and left? Or was it because
Holmes was just a creepy human being?
Yeah. Was it like she kind of figured out that Holmes was no good, or do you think that maybe Holmes didn't return her feelings? I'm thinking that she probably walked in on something with Julia and Holmes.
Yeah, well, I would think that Holmes would have killed her if that had happened.
But remember, she went directly to her brother and told him she needed to get on a train to the house. And then she up and died. Anyways. Coincidence? Possibly. The book is like, probably not. It was just an accident, disease. Took her, and I'm like, yeah, at this point, I'm not believing in coincidences with this story. And it takes us back into back to Burnham. And so he's basically, at this point, he's living at Jackson Park, the site of the fairground. And he's living away from his wife and 5 kids. He's moved them out of the city. And so he's already realized that Chicago is not the place to raise a family. He's like, let's go on and move on out to the burbs. And he's writing his wife. So, as a wife, if your husband was living in town, wouldn't you occasionally surprise him with, like, I don't know, a picnic lunch?
You know, I was actually thinking about that.
Just so you could see him?
Not necessarily. If it wasn't because a lot of the time people did not get divorced because it would tarnish your entire reputation, at least from the woman's standpoint, not necessarily from the man, but for the woman. And I'm wondering if she just did not
love him
anymore. I mean, she had 5 kids. She's probably just trying to. I have 3 kids. I barely holding on as it is. I mean, imagine having 5 kids.
Oh my God.
And you just are trying to keep up with life.
Stay sane.
Yeah, you're trying to stay sane. You don't want to have to. I mean, imagine traveling like that with 5 kids. One, it would be very expensive.
Well, let's not forget their helpers too. The help.
But still.
So you got accommodations for all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So they write love letters. And
but are they love letters? Or are they forged?
I don't know. We don't ever hear anything really about her love letters to him. We hear about his love letters to her. And
are they found on him or are they found on her? I always find it weird when like the guy is found with all the love letters. Because you're like, did you actually ever send those? Or are you just keeping those to make yourself look good?
Questions. Well, not only that, one of them was really, really racy. Like, ooh, scandalous. Oh, here it is. He writes to Margaret. He's like, I will be on the lookout for you, my dear girl. You must expect to give yourself up when you come.
Ew, that's creepy.
Right? I'm like, bow chicka bow wow. So do you think that's like 1800 sexting?
Yes. I mean, I feel like more prominent men did that back in the day. Well, they probably do it the same amount guys today do it. Because if you think about it, Hamilton, if we're going to bring it back to our other podcast, Hamilton used to write stuff like that. He used to write racy stuff.
Yes.
Racy letters and poems and stuff.
Okay. Do you think it was...
So I wonder if, like, to bring it to biology, if men are just kind of like that sometimes. Excuse me. That was gross.
Okay. So do you think that it is... is it better to get the love letter or to get the caress, the bow chicka bow wow love letter like that? Be ready to come when you come. Did you just get it? You just got it. Okay. I was like, wait a minute.
I'm dead. Oh gosh.
You finally got it. Okay, thank you. Because that's what I read. I was like, whoa.
What the what?
Or is it the unacceptable society caresses like Holmes did?
I would rather have the letter. Because I can stop reading the letter if I want to.
Whereas the caress is like, whoa, buddy, back that train up.
I have a feeling Holmes would not be as easily deterred.
And, yeah, hi, Ollie.
Is that your opinion on the subject, Oliver?
I think he's in agreement. So we'd both go for the letters.
Yeah.
Not the
creepy.
Yeah. So not the crazy serial killer, more the business. Well, then we're going off 50 Shades of Grey there, and so. Meanwhile, back to Holmes and Julia. So Julia makes friends with this lady down the block. And then she's like, we're getting married. And Pearl is going to have a new daddy.
Yes. Miss Pearl.
And let's have a Christmas tree at your house instead of in our own building for Pearl. Did you find that weird? That the Christmas tree would be at a neighbor's house instead of at their house?
Yes, because I mean, unless you're celebrating Christmas all together at your neighbor's house, then it's kind of like, what's the point?
Right.
I mean, I don't know. If you want to say that Holmes was being randomly altruistic and being like, hey, we only have enough money for one tree, or I can only con one person out of a tree. Let's put it at our neighbor's house.
Right. And then the tree and the presents they don't go to use. Instead, Holmes offers this guy named Charles Chappelle $36 to clean the bones of skull and return to him a fully articulated skull.
Ugh.
I know.
So much of this.
So you're like, so how much does it cost? Hi, Ollie.
Can I have a hug?
So you're like, how much does it cost for murder? You make a profit.
I mean, Chappelle, what are we gonna do with you?
We're not going to call you Dave.
I was gonna say something. Oh, so now I might have missed this. In the book, does it say that Julie ends up pregnant with Holmes's baby?
It did, yes.
Okay.
It was like, oh, she got pregnant, and he's like, I will marry you, but only if I can take care of the situation.
Yes.
AKA abortion.
On Christmas Eve of all days. Yes, Daddy.
Right.
Mommy's talking.
No, I'm not Daddy.
No, he's looking at a picture. And then he straight up murders her.
With ether.
Chloroform, I thought.
Same difference.
Yes, murdered Smith by overdosing her with chloroform. Later, he killed Pearl.
With the same way, just sneaks on into her room.
Makes me want to lock the door at night.
That has got to be like the worst Christmas ever.
Yes. Oh man. And of course, when somebody asks him about it, he's like, oh yeah, they just went to go visit family. And will never come back.
Again. And then, so he rents out the apartment, and there's Pearl's jacket still laying there, and all the clothes, and the people he rents out the apartment to, they're like, okay, let's just. I mean, don't you think? All right, if you rented an apartment and it was furnished with everybody's plates and clothes, wouldn't that kind of raise suspicion for you?
I wonder if by this point,
there's clothes in the closet.
People are just too afraid to confront Holmes. Because I wonder, people say he's very charismatic. I wonder if he had like that sinister charisma about him. You know what I mean? Like somebody who smiles with their mouth, a really great smile, but then has like murder eyes.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Where you're like, I'm gonna say yes to whatever you're saying. I'm gonna pretend like whatever you're saying makes sense because I'm afraid you're gonna turn around and murder me when I'm sleeping.
Oh, it's so on. It's like that.
It reminds me of How I Met Your Mother.
Yes. She's like, I will kill you.
Yes.
Hi.
But I mean, that's the only way I can figure out how Holmes is able to do what he does without getting caught for so long. Hi. Because he's had, I mean, despite the fact that many of the people that he's had around him, like, he burns bridges. He either burns bridges or he kills them.
Hi.
Buddy. You know what I mean? Like, either he's like, I'm not paying you for all the work that you've done, be gone with you, and the person gets mad and, like, disappears. Because, I mean, honestly, like, how do you do that? Even back then, like, how do you just say, I'm just not going to pay you and get away with it? Didn't they have debtor's prison and stuff? Yet he was never imprisoned for all the money he owed.
Well, they did get him on the insurance fraud.
Yeah, but that's insurance fraud. That's not necessarily you owe me money. It's you've got money for it.
Yeah.
Faking a death. Yep.
Hi. Bye.
Hi, Bubba. You know what I mean? Like, he got away with so much that actually they don't even know how many people he killed. They only found 9 bodies. He admitted to killing 27, but they think there was upwards of 200 people that he killed.
Probably. I mean,
but he was not the only, like, I mean, he was a sociopath. Let's just lay it out there. He was a straight sociopath.
yes.
But in this story, he's not the only killer. You have Pendergast, Patrick Eugene Joseph Pendergast, who's also a murderer.
Hi.
How did you introduce him into the story? I did not get that far with the.
Well, it introduces. Ollie, you want to hear a story?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it introduces him through politics and the mayor, because he keeps sending postcards. I know, postcards. When everyone is writing letters in this day and age, he sends postcards. And so he sends this postcard to A.S. Trude, who's a lawyer. And it's like, it says, for some reason, Trude keeps the postcard. And the postcard is like, my dear Mr. Trude, were you hurt much? And at this point, you're thinking, stalker much?
Well, Pendergast had an interesting background. To put his strange behavior into a little bit of context. Thank you, Bubba. He kind of like H.H. Holmes, who had like the alcoholic father, and then let's see. He was the hardest person for me to find, I'll be honest with you.
Yes.
I just want to double.
What I've found interesting is that for some reason, Trude kept the cards. It's like he started his own harassment file.
Probably. You always have to have evidence for that stuff.
But right, and Larson, he talks about how the police were not really that competent.
Well, I wonder if they even took Pendergast seriously. Because I wonder, because he had that serious head injury from a fall when he was very young, at the age of 4. He was unconscious for a long time, and then he was vomiting for almost like a month afterwards. He was always a very weird kid, kept to himself, very irritable and then excitable, and he had a very poor memory. So I wonder if they kind of just brushed him off as mentally
Unstable?
yeah, like, well, not necessarily unstable, because even to say you were mentally unstable, you would still keep a close eye on that person. But to just say that, oh, he's just a little slow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have all of his marbles, but he's harmless.
Right. It talks about him. He's in the park at one point, and this man sees him, and he's walking back and forth and talking to himself. And when people start talking to themselves, it's never a good thing.
Oh, I talk to myself all the time.
Well, I guess when you start answering your own conversations, it's never a good thing. And so people start giving him a wide berth and all, and he's just walking back and forth, and he says he had his hat over his eyes and he was looking up. So I don't know, I kind of see him pulling a Ray Charles here, just walking back and forth, head bobbing and all, and he walks straight into a tree.
Well, go ahead.
And that's really all they had to say about his movements like that.
But let's talk about real quick so that I can come back to his mental thing. Why he's a murderer.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That'll take us back to our 5-time mayor. And
yes. Mr. Carter Harrison Sr.
Yes. And how Pendergast felt that he was fixing to become a corporate counsel for the mayor. And he writes W.F. Cooling, would you like to be my corporate counsel or my assistant? I'm fixing to become corporation counsel. You shall be my assistant. It's like, no, not even would you like to be my assistant? Would you like to be my neighbor? More like, you're going to be my assistant.
Yes. So he never actually got that position.
No. It was just a huge delusion in his head.
Yes, and he was very upset about it. So I don't want to give away too many of the details, but long story short, Pendergast kills
Harrison.
He kills Harrison. But in mentioning his mental faculties, in his first trial, Pendergast is actually found insane. He gets off on a plea of insanity.
Sent to an asylum. Was he sent to an asylum? I don't remember.
I don't think that he was. But they did another. They tried him again.
Mm-hmm.
Because several doctors said that while Pendergast was paranoid, he was not
incompetent.
Yes. But in the end, he was hanged, much like Holmes was when he was finally caught.
Because even though the electric chair came into development, or was at the fair, it wasn't in use at that point.
No. So, I mean,
Yeah.
what would you even do with that kind of a person? It's kind of reminded me because I started watching American Horror Story Asylum, and they've got the one character who's there because they say he was insane because they think he killed his wife and a bunch of other people. But like, why would you? I don't know. I mean, I guess if you're insane, you don't deserve to die for what you did because you can't help it. But at the same time, you're like, meh, you're just gonna do it again, aren't you? I don't know. That's a really tricky subject anyway, but
That's why there's the whole criminally insane and wings at prisons.
And thank God life is not like American Horror Story. It was a really creepy laugh for me. I apologize. Let's see. But did they do too much on his whole thing? I mean,
no, it was just more, it was sporadic at moments. I mean, you would have to wait. They mentioned it possibly in the beginning, kind of hinted at it. And then, like everything else, you would have to wait to about 100 pages before you were like, okay, you've given me the context clues up here, and then 100 pages later, you're like, oh, here's some more hints about dun dun dun. Wait for it. And then about 50 more pages in, or 100 more pages in, 75, whatever, you're finally like, okay, yes, I called it. It is the Ferris wheel. Booyah. But that was one of our other characters that they talked about, the fair. They were having a problem because the Paris World's Fair several years before had deployed the Eiffel Tower, and they had nothing to, America had nothing to out Eiffel the Eiffel. And so finally, they're like, they talk about this contraption that would be there, and then it's like, okay, another 100 pages. He alludes to a Pittsburgh engineer, and then you're still like, okay, it's got to be Ferris's wheel. And then you finally get in there, and you're like, yes, he's going to build a vertically revolving wheel, 150 feet in diameter. And like, I called it. It's the Ferris wheel. And then at the end, it's like, he signed the letter George Washington Gale Ferris. Which,
what a name.
Yes, that in itself is a name. But then the guy doesn't even show up for the installation or anything. And his wife is the one who tests it out. And you start, right? I start thinking at one point, I'm like, do you think that Ferris actually designed the wheel? Or was it his wife?
Or was he afraid that it was going to die and he didn't have a very good relationship with his wife?
Well,
to take it in a sinister. And he can say, oh, I wasn't even there for the whole unveiling of the wheel.
Yeah, exactly. But if your dream is being realized, wouldn't you want to be there to see it?
I would, of course. And unless you're socially awkward, which I don't think he was, but...
Because he had been there when Burnham basically gave the architects and engineers a dressing down because they hadn't come up with anything to out Eiffel the Eiffel. And so his wife insisted on being the first one aboard, despite his partner's attempts to dissuade her. And so she's out there, right, when it finally gets put together. And he's like, okay, Yeah, it works. And she telegraphs her husband and tells him of the success. And he cables back, God bless you, my dear.
Gazoon tight.
Right?
Nice.
Like, there's a really good way to let the woman know you love her. God bless you, my dear.
Or I wonder now, again, taking this in another direction, if because people nowadays will hide an illness to protect a project. You know what I mean?
So you think he was sick?
He could have been sick, and instead of telling people that he was sick, with a serious illness,
He sent the wife
yes.
in his stead. The wife and the partner in his stead.
I mean, it could happen, I guess.
Yeah.
Because people do that in order to protect, like, stocks and,
Yes.
you know what I mean?
I see that going on, but I also see because they had to design the women's building, they had a competition, and the lady that designed it, they gave her a hassle because they didn't think a woman could have designed it.
Oh, that happens all the time.
Right. And
books and everything.
I can totally see her letting her husband take credit for it if she loves him, because it would be their accomplishment then.
Or because he loves her so much, because he knows that she would not have been able to get as far with the wheel, maybe he said, look, you design it, I'll put my name on it, that way you can see your project come to life.
Yes.
And they're not going to take a woman as serious, and she might not have even gotten as close to it as he did.
Well, it took him 3 times. He went in front of the committee board 3 different times in order to get his project approved. And the second time they approved it, and then the next day they came back and they were like, no, this isn't going to work. Sorry.
So I wonder if he did it for his wife.
Right.
And then he stood back so that she could enjoy the attention for it. Even though technically they were celebrating him, she's the one that got the spotlight pretty much.
Well, in his speech when he opens it up, he talks about how it was all her. It couldn't have been done without her. Now, do you think that was just the woman behind the man? Do you think?
I don't know. They could have been partners on the project.
Could have been.
Instead of it just being one of their ideas, it could have been both of their ideas. But again, only he could have put his name on it in order to get it built.
Could have been. Could have been. I can see partners.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I can see him going home maybe and talking to his wife about the day, and or he's had this troubling aspect of something, and maybe she just says something, oh, what if you did this? And then it's like click, 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 click. And then he goes to his engineer guy and he's like, make this work.
I mean, it could have been that, or it could have just been something that they both, it could not necessarily a hobby, but something that they had in common.
Right.
You know, but she's not going to get that kind of recognition because she wouldn't have been able to go to school or anything for it.
Right.
So she could have been like highly involved, but only from behind the scenes. He would have had the background in order to bring it to life.
And speaking of bringing things to life, I guess that would lead us back into our second marriage with Holmes and how he has a kid with this one. And
yes.
Go ahead. with millet. Mudget. Um, and he moves them out uptown.
Who were you talking about? I'm confused.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, his love life's confusing. So let's recap. He's got the first wife that he left that had a kid as a teenager.
Yes.
The second wife that he's married under the Holmes name that he left with her parents. Then he has the relationship with the married woman, the Amazon Julia. And she gets divorced from her husband, and he kills her and the kid off. Then he's got this fourth lady, and she is basically rich. And how much rich? We're talking rich. I mean, she had about $50,000 inheritance.
Well, and we need to also mention that he never ever gets divorced.
Right.
He kind of like just runs away from his wives. I feel like he marries them. If he's going to marry you and not kill you, he'll run away from you, but he won't kill you.
Right.
If he refuses to marry you, then you're not safe.
And this is the third wife, but he doesn't make it legal. He has it. He pretends that it's legal, and he basically sets up like a little shotgun wedding for her. And then at that time, he's marrying her under another assumed name, which she's from Boston, and he's like, okie dokie, this is how you knew me there, and let's get married, and you move here. And then she gets all jealous, so he moves her uptown and invites her sister to come. And at one point, you're like, why isn't he going to kill her off? I mean, and then you're like, oh, because Minnie, that's her name, Minnie Williams. Because she was plump, plain, and short, and had a baby face. Didn't seem to know a great deal. And so you're like, why is he changing his MO? Because he's gone after all these beautiful women. And the author's like, she had winning attributes. That's just like saying that she has a great personality.
She did.
And so then you find out that her estimated value is between $50,000 and $100,000, which in today's market is $1.5 to $3 million.
That was one winning personality.
Right. And he uses the alias Henry Gordon. And he explains that so you're like, okay, she knows him as Henry Gordon. She calls him as Harry. He sends her letters every once in a while. He backs off. He met Julia. She hardly gets any letters. But basically, he's still keeping the fish on the line type deal.
Yeah.
And so finally, he asked her to marry him, like I said. And her sister is all like, okay, things are moving way too fast. And then somehow he swindles her into signing over this Fort Worth property that her uncle left her to an Alexander bond. Yeah, that twang came in there. And
Texas.
He left her. And you're like, wait, she didn't die before the wedding.
Nope. But she is not actually the wife that I was referring to.
It's not.
No. He was legitimately married to.
Clara Lovering?
No, that was his first wife.
Marta Belknap.
It's his second wife. He has a third wife, Georgina Yoke.
Ooh, I forgot about that one.
But he was legit, or as legit as you can be when you've already got two other wives stashed away somewhere.
Three, because he stashes, well, for a little while. Anyways, he stashes Millie.
Minnie.
Yeah, Minnie. Sorry, Millie. Minnie uptown gets her away from.
But he was never technically married to her.
No, they had a wedding.
But was he? I'm so confused now. His life confuses me.
I know. He married her. Wanted the wedding done quickly and quietly. Just him, Minnie, and the preacher. He arranged everything, and to Minnie, the little ceremony appeared to be legal, and in its quiet way, very romantic. But in fact, no record of their union was ever entered into marriage in Cook County, Illinois.
That's why I was saying it wasn't an official marriage.
Well, see, my thinking was on that one is probably because then the second wife would have seen an announcement in the paper, and there would have gone his scheme to kill off and inherit all her money.
But his second wife actually dies after he does.
Yeah.
But he didn't know that. He didn't know that was about to happen. But he ends up killing Minnie and her sister.
I know. You saw that one coming like a mile away.
Oh, yeah. Did we ever mention Holmes's BFF, Benjamin Pitzel?
As one of his 3 henchmen.
Yes, but this was the main henchman.
Yes.
He was the big, not the big kahuna, but...
He carried the bodies and knew where they were buried.
Yes.
He was more like a conciliary type. He was your James Caan.
Yes.
But without a law degree.
But didn't he... Nope. JK. I was about to say something. Oh, Pytel agreed to fake his own death so his wife could collect a $10,000 life insurance policy, which she was to split with Holmes and some attorney dude. Thank you, Bubba.
Okay. So, I don't know, but it's still, I'm still hung up on the Williams sisters, Anna and Minnie. So, Anna comes to visit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, she starts calling him Brother Harry. And they take the tour of Chicago, and he awes her with lavish homes and the buildings. And then all of a sudden, he took the sisters to the Union Stockyards, where the tour guide leads them into the heart of the slaughter. And you're like, because nothing says I love your sister more than let's go visit the slaughterhouse.
And all of its lovely smells.
No, I mean, they're seeing everything. And the guy, Larson's all like, the hogs were still alive and they're being butchered, and the yards embodied everything Anna had heard about Chicago and how it's irresistible, even savage drive towards wealth and power. So your brother-in-law takes you to a slaughterhouse. Do you think that in any way that could have been foreshadowing about what he's fixing to do to you?
I feel like he was trying to warn them at this point. Like, look, you're about to die. run.
Right.
Like, how else are you to see that?
Let's go visit the slaughterhouse.
Honestly, if my brother-in-law was like, hey, Heather, let's go visit the slaughterhouse, I'm like, hey, you and I are never going to be alone together ever again. Like, ever, ever, ever.
Or even better yet, are we coming home with sausage?
Ooh, human sausage.
Oh, man. And then he calls up, of course, his buddy Chappelle. Hey, I've got a body for
Not
you.
Dave Chappelle.
Charles. No,
Yep.
no relation.
None.
Okay.
But, I mean, we could go on with all the people that Holmes has killed.
We could.
I
Or,
don't think we should.
yeah, or we could talk about the landscape artist Olmsted. Did you get that Olmsted was manic depressive?
Yes. I think, I mean, they all had just so many personal issues.
Each of them. Each of them has like some underlying diagnosis that you've got to work out. And that's where all those context clues come in. I mean, I guess listening to it, maybe you got to figure it out, but you're like, context clues, let's see. Okay, he's got the thing with the boats. He's fixated on the boats and the island. And he's got these blue periods. He's got the insomnia. And you're like, manic depressive.
Well, he also fixates on things.
Yes.
Like, he's a bit of a control freak also. I don't want to say freak. And I feel like you kind of should be like that because what he was doing, the landscape architect, like
he's seeing the big picture.
He sees it all, but then everybody keeps asking him to add things and change things, and he's like, no, that's not going to work. And they keep pestering him about this stuff, because he actually talked about that happening while he was working on Central Park.
Yes.
The Central Park.
Yes. The Central Park.
And he did not want that to happen at
and
the
Biltmore.
fair.
And yes, and so he's also he comes to this understanding, basically, that less is more when it comes to the fairgrounds. He's like, let us be thought over much plain and simple, even bare, rather than gaudy, flashy, cheap, and metrolicious. Let us manifest the taste of gentlemen. Taste of gentlemen is basically less is more. Did you know that?
Sorry about that.
No problem.
When a baby starts shouting about poop, you kind of have to leave the room for a second. But, I mean, with all these people, what brings every single one of them together is one thing.
Dun, dun, dun.
Bum, 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 bum. It is
Chicago.
It's the Chicago World Fair. Because the very big,
the White City.
Yes, the White City. And the reference that the devil was in the White City due to all of these issues. But what brings all these issues to light is the fact that that's where the World's Fair was. Because that's why Holmes was there with his murder hotel. That's why, I mean,
yeah,
that's why they were all there. I mean, the amount of murder that happened during that time period, I don't want to say it's directly connected to it, to the fair, but
but it goes hand in hand with it.
It does. And as much as they had to fight to get the fair in Chicago, because it's between Chicago and New York, and the people, the politicos of Chicago fought tooth and nail to get it in their city,
Yes.
only to have the devil show up as well.
So what I found really interesting about the fair was that you had all these world leaders, and you they said that that was part of the fair. You never knew who you would end up sitting next to, whether it's a world leader or a famous actor or basically a celebrity. It talked about Buffalo Bill Cody and how he had his Wild West show installed next door because they wouldn't give him a slot in the Midway. And I know if you go down the Midway now, you're like, oh, let's try to knock over the bottle and play the strongman game and get the baskets in the hula hoop, and the rubber ducky game, and those various games like that. But the Midway in the World's Fair was actually different countries. And like there was Egypt had Cairo Street. And one of the big scandalous things about the World's Fair was the belly dancing. And so it alluded to that in the beginning, and finally, about 200 pages in, you're finally like, yes, it is belly dancing. Called it.
They basically made you work for it.
Right. He makes you work for it. I know.
Definitely not a quick read. Kind of like Alexander Hamilton. We keep doing these things to ourselves.
I don't know.
Are not quick and easy reads, and it's probably not going to get any better next month with the banned books.
Hey, Ollie, did you know that Buffalo Bill Cody, like one of my favorite things about this is that he halted his horse and in a burst of dirt and dust removed his hat, and with great sweeping gesture bowed his head until it nearly touched the horn of his saddle. Anthony stood, that's Susan B. Anthony, and returned the bow, and as enthusiastic as a girl, a friend said, waved her handkerchief at Cody. The significance of this moment escaped no one. Here was one of the greatest heroes of America's past, saluting one of the foremost heroes of the future. The encounter brought the audience to its feet in a thunder of applause and cheers. So here you have this man who was basically the epitome of the Wild West and taming the Wild West. And he's tipping his hat, bending his waist, as it was. Okay. To women's liberation.
Which
I found kind of interesting also, because the first building to be done in the fair was the women's building. I mean, they got through. It was designed by a woman. They installed it. Of course, there was various women conflicting social aspects about design and things. But eventually, it's like you've got Tina Fey and Amy Poehler on Saturday Night Live going, bitches get shit done.
I mean, the whole book. I did not realize. I mean, they don't ever, at least not in my history class, they never talked about the World's Fair. They mentioned it, but for the most part, it was never like deeply discussed. What about you?
No,
So
no.
it's kind
I
of more
learned about
interesting.
I learned about the World's Fair in different books.
Yeah.
And like a Christian fiction book that I read one time. And it was set, the main character was a girl. There was a Pinkerton detective agent. The fair was the background. But none of this stuff was mentioned in that book. And you're like, now that we're reading this one, I'm like, okay, how much did she really research that book? And I'm not going to spoil any plot lines or anything for that or give any names away because I actually enjoyed the book.
Yeah.
So what I found interesting was that when you think about it, one of the members that showed up was Ferdinand, the Archduke Ferdinand.
Mm-hmm.
And his murder is what started WW1.
Yes.
So after this, I was trying to think, were there any other World's Fairs after this event?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Uh,
Like the stigma of the fire and the deaths and all had tainted it. And then you're like, okay, Archduke Ferdinand, it's kind of tough to have a World's Fair when the world's at war.
I'm trying. I have to figure it out. I have to know. Okay. I think I've got it.
Okay.
Sorry. Nope. JK. Hmm. Trying to see, because I don't want to get it wrong.
I mean, it's more expos now. It's not really a World's Fair.
Yeah, and that's
it's
kind of what I'm seeing right now.
It's more that instead of every country coming together and having these amazing advancements in technology and medicine and agriculture and home, and it's more like, oh, well, let's just do our own little thing. We'll have a little conference here for technology and show all the new stuff instead of like square mile buildings full of various things. But then can you see they said it took about 2 weeks to get through the fair. Can you see people now just taking off for 2 weeks going to a fair?
No, not when you have Disney World, to be honest.
Oh, and they hinted at that.
In itself is a giant World's Fair.
Yes, they hinted at that. One of the carpenters on the World's Fair and all was Disney's dad, Walt Disney's dad, Elias. Eliza, Ezra. Dang it! I knew his name like 5 minutes ago, but
you second guessed yourself.
I know. It's always go with the answer C. Go with your first choice. But anyways,
Elias.
There
Elias.
We go. All right. But so do you think that being a kid around this time, seeing the World's Fair, influenced him to build his own? It was like one of those things that we learn in childhood that, is so deep seated in our childhood that we don't really realize as adults that we're fulfilling it.
No.
No.
I see it as a Tony Stark, Howard Stark kind of a thing. With the Stark Expo.
Yes.
That's how I see it. Of course, life is not always a comic book, but
we can try.
Yeah.
We can try. We can be our own comic book heroes.
Woohoo! I will probably end up being Cat Lady. Not Catwoman, Cat Lady.
Oh, much classier that way.
Of course.
I guess that makes me your wacky sidekick.
Cat Lady always needs a friend.
That's right. I'm book lore, girl.
Is there anything else? Excuse me. That you wanted to mention from the book?
Not really. I mean, I think we basically covered it. It's probably going to be made into a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. Hopefully, I won't be yelling at it like I was yelling at the book for about 2 hours. Like, really? Don't go in that room. He's definitely going to kill you. Poor little old lady. You know she is totally underneath the floorboards until he builds the kiln.
Oh, gosh.
Or calls in Chappelle.
But, I mean, out of 5 cups of coffee, I would probably give this a 2. I can't get through it.
Now,
I mean, it would just take way more concentration than a mother of 3 can give it.
See, I give it probably a 4.
Really?
Yes, because I liked the context clues aspect of it. Even though I was like, oh, it's taking so long to figure it out. But then the payoff was like, yes, nailed it. And that was without looking it up.
And I wonder if it would have been different for me if I didn't have any knowledge of H.H. Holmes. You know? Because I already kind of, like, his story, I knew. So that wasn't anything surprising for me. And I wonder if it would have been more of a gripping story if I didn't know what to expect. No. Is that your opinion on it?
Yeah. Yep.
Because it's kind of like if you read a murder mystery, before you even start the book, you already know who killed the...
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you know the plot of the story.
Yeah.
Because even with, like, a lot of autobiographies or biographies that I read right now, like, I don't know all the intimate details. Like with Hamilton or with the Keith Richards biography that I read a couple of years ago.
Ooh.
Yeah. We're not reading that for book club because that's just ridiculously long.
Okay. But that one's supposed to be really good.
It is. It is.
Unless you vote for it. The next biography thing. And then we'll have to break that one up into segments too.
Because you would have to break that up into a year.
Speaking of book club, so as you know, it is time for our announcement. And drum roll, please. Did you hear that drum roll? Can you hear it?
I can't get my tongue.
Yes, Ollie, do our drum roll. Our drumroll candidates are Madame Bovary
by Gustave Flaubert
and Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. Yes. So, won't you go down the rabbit hole with us next time for September's BAM Book Month?
Yay!
See you next month.
Bye!